I wonder if you are taking heart in what the president describes as a good phone call, a very good phone call with Governor Walz. He said, we seem to be on a similar wavelength. Or do you worry more about the rhetoric we heard from the press secretary today?
You know, what I know about this president is that whatever needs to be said in order to make him feel like he's got to win here, right? I mean, I'm so disappointed when I hear the rhetoric that is still coming out of Washington, D.C., that they can stand here and say that it is local electeds here, it's Democrats here that have caused the heightened, tension within our city here. But when you have a federal government and its agents who are clearly telling people, recounting the incidents that they have caused on the ground, and it does not match the video evidence, I do not know how it is that they can turn around and blame that onto local electeds here, Democrats here, and especially the rhetoric comment when you group whole groups of people as murderers and rapists, when we know in Minnesota here that our immigrant and refugee communities have made our state stronger. This is a self-inflicted, self-created situation by the federal government. But you know what? Whatever it is that they need to say in order to give them the ability to leave our space here, I support it.
Do you take heart in the actions you saw today by the administration? It seems that Gregory Bovino is on his way home. Tom Holman is being dispatched to Minneapolis. Is that encouraging, or does that make you worry?
You know, all I can do is have hope. And that is what we do here in Minnesota well, is that we are optimists in light of the challenges in front of us. All I can do is be hopeful, just like the rest of Minnesota, that this is a turning point for all of us here.
Let me ask you about some of the training that your office has been providing to protesters in your city, working with advocacy groups to teach constitutional observer courses, to train people on how to videotape law enforcement without interfering in ICE operations. I ask you about this, Mayor, because much of the rhetoric we've heard from the administration is these two people who were killed in the Twin Cities were interfering with federal ICE operations and therefore putting themselves in danger. What are you telling people to do?
We are telling people to not interfere into any of the federal agents' operations. In the Constitutional Observer training, we are very clear about what it means to be there and to document. And so I will say that I can't guarantee that everybody who shows up to an event is trained as a constitutional observer, but we know that we've trained thousands of people in order to be supportive and to be there to help document. And I want to just have one point of clarification that Alex was not at a protest. It was a morning in which he just happened to be in a space in which he saw activity and he wanted to go and document. I think that it is dangerous when we say that just because people are gathering or they exist is that they are protesting. They are not. They know that their neighbors have been taken off of the streets, that people are being ripped out of their homes forcibly, that people are having children and families ripped apart. And so when our neighbors see each other hurting and impacted, we show up. And showing up doesn't mean that we are protesting. It means we are there to document because we know that that legal documentation is the only thing that that family may have in legal proceedings to try to keep family members who are here legally here with their families.
One of the faces of this operation in your city is a friend's brother-in-law of yours, who now most people know as the man who was taken outside of his home wearing nothing but shorts, Crocs, and a blanket. Chong Lee Scott Tao, his photograph being taken out of his home in freezing temperatures after being arrested without a warrant. His ID apparently was not checked until he got back home. Homeland did bring him back home after he was pulled out of his house. They said they were looking for two sex offenders. The family says it was a case of mistaken identity. Mayor, has the federal government told you what that operation was all about?
So I don't have a direct connection with the federal government. They do not coordinate and they do not communicate with us proactively. What I can say, because this is an active investigation, is that identification was offered. And in the operations, that was not something that they considered or cared to take into consideration when they took Chong Lee out of his house. I think that not only was this an unfortunate incident, and I think it has been very gracious of the family to say it is a case of mistaken identity. It is the fact that he looks nothing like the people that they are looking for, and that to add insult to injury after the event. Instead of being truthful that they had the wrong person, they lied about it. They said that those individuals they were looking for lived in the home with this family, which they do not. And this family has been in the home for the last 2 years, and the individuals they were looking for were already, one of them was already incarcerated. So in just basic public searches, they could have found that information. So I think that what is making the situation worse on the ground is that we cannot trust our federal government in being truthful about the work that they are doing and how they are executing on this work.
Well, I ask you about his case in particular because you were a Hmong refugee, and I know that you came to this country at age 3 as a Vietnam War era resettler. You were part of a resettlement program. And so individuals, I'm assuming, like Chong Lee, have played a long role in the diverse culture in your state, having fought side by side with Americans in the Vietnam War. To what extent have you seen authorities operating in communities of color versus European migrant communities in your city?
We have not seen one account of Europeans who, we know that there are Europeans who are here undocumented, and yet we have not heard of one account of them being profiled. What I will say just on your point about Chong Lee's family is that his mother, who just passed away a few weeks ago, I'm flying to California in a couple of weeks to attend his mother's funeral. His mother was one of the first Hmong nurses in Laos at the Samtong Hospital. She was a nurse with my mother-in-law, and they took care of wounded soldiers, American and Hmong soldiers who were fighting for democracy and fighting for America before they ever set foot in this country. And that is the family that this administration went after. A woman who raised her children to be law-abiding citizens, who fought and took care of soldiers and veterans, who came to this country and was a contributing member of society, and who has always been deeply committed to this country. That is the person that was ripped away. And in weeks of her death, that her family would be targeting this way is such a disgrace to the legacy of Hmong people and the fight that they had with the Americans and American soldiers.
Well, I appreciate your telling their story. Mayor Her, you've been in office, I believe, for 3 weeks, so this is your only reality as the mayor of St. Paul. Will anything short of ICE withdrawing from the city settle this standoff?
I think that ICE has to have a complete withdrawal from here. And to be honest, we have always worked with our federal agents on cases that do not violate our separation ordinance, that we have always been willing to get to work with them on detaining hardened criminals, people who have records who should not be here, and that we can continue to go back to working in a way that keeps our country safe because we know how to do that. Our law enforcement knows how to apprehend people and to keep our community safe, and that we would like to be able to go back to that environment in which we can do our jobs well.
Well, that's pretty important, Mayor, and I think it's worth underscoring that. You're pledging now before our listeners and viewers to work with federal authorities to arrest, detain, and prosecute those who are in this country illegally and have broken the law. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. And we've always had that kind of relationship long before the Trump administration and previous presidential administrations. And so we continue to be committed to keeping law and order in our city.